This is episode 20 of the Ownstream podcast featuring Theresa Sgobba. Welcome to the Ownstream podcast, episode 20.
How exciting.
That's very cool. So I'm going to do the intro this week. I'll talk a little bit about our very special guest and a little update from our side of things. But our guest today is the lovely, the talented Theresa Sgobba, the co-founder of Ownstream, the co-host of this podcast, and my beautiful wife and friend to many. And anyway, our topic this week is all about plant-based living, something that I consider you an expert at, and you've done quite a lot of learning and education around this. This is a real serious thing for you and something you've done for actively lived for half a decade. So I think that or more. Yeah. So this should be very interesting. I'm excited to learn from you as I have for the last 5 years, almost 6 years. Anyway, we'll get into all that. So this is going to be about the value of this diet, which reaches so far beyond just how great you feel, how healthy it is, and then quite specifically about transitioning from wherever you're at food and diet-wise into this model for eating food, relating to nature, and living a very vibrant, healthy lifestyle. So it's an enormously rich and important topic. For me personally, I can say that this has been the most powerful lens through which I have transformed everything. It has impacted everything. The food you put in your body on a daily basis is not only a political, social act, but when you feel better, just so many other things change. When I look at myself in the mirror and I see how lean and healthy and strong I am, it just naturally does something different to my day. I'll cover that more in a minute, but it's hugely important, and we're excited to share this content with you. Little update from our end and a request. So our van project is continuing. We are not less and less tentatively slated to leave around July 20th, so that's under 2 months to go. We have a brisk path in front of us to finish up this project, but I'm very confident that we will. We're just wrapping up the installation. We're finalizing the power plan. We have a guy who's going to install that hopefully in the next week or so. We'll throw up some walls, we'll put some furniture in there, and we'll be on our way. So it's been enormously fun, really, really interesting. All kinds of fun, zany, crazy things are happening, which is terrific, as to be expected. So that's where that's at. There should be a video coming out fairly soon. I want to shoot a video about kind of this first phase of getting past the installation, which we're a day away from. So that'll come out soon. So anyway, that's kind of where that sits. July 20th on or about, we're going to hit the road. The first date on the calendar is July 31st in Yosemite Valley. So we want to have a little time to spend between here and there. If we sprinted, we could get there in a day, but we don't want to do that. So that's where that stands, and we will be working with clients on the road. So folks interested in working with us, whether it's with Theresa on plant-based living, which is the title of her program, or with the two of us on transitioning more broadly into what we would call an Ownstream lifestyle, which is something uniquely tailored to you. We're having some really, really powerful client work going on currently. It's easily the most exciting part of this business work for us right now. Kind of amazing, really. It's a very special time. Things are changing very quickly, and people are really riding that wave. And we're seeing some very, very special dynamic things happening with our clients, which, from what I can see, is a little to do with us, a lot to do with them, and a lot to what's happening more broadly in the world now about people kind of really taking a step back and looking at their lives more honestly and saying, okay, what do I really deeply desire? And anyway, we can talk about that more at another time. But anyway, it's very, very rich process for us. It's very rewarding. So if you're into that, if that's kind of where you're at in particular, it seems to me that the people we're really attracting are those looking for a job change, but who are wondering if a more significant change is in order, if it's not just about the job. Most people who find themselves in kind of mainstream jobs want out of that job, and I get it. But what we're finding is when we begin to contemplate that, some deeper things begin to bubble to the surface about dreams maybe long forgotten or pushed aside, kind of tapping into that and exposing that and really allowing that, the beautiful power that it should have. We call it the calling. Suddenly this calling wants to pour itself into every part of our lives, as it should. It's a very spiritual process. And so people are kind of coming to us wanting kind of transition advice about their jobs, which we understand, but it tends to take on such a greater magnitude. And within that process, food and diet is often contemplated anew. And what we try to do, though we don't impose this on anybody, but we do try to bring forward our experience, certainly, and what we've learned in terms of science and health and where food fits into that. And so anyway, this becomes a topic of exploration for us, which is Theresa's specialty. So without any further ado, I will introduce as our guest this week the co-founder of Ownstream and Ownstream podcast, Theresa Sgobba, and also whom I would refer as my kind of plant-based living coach, because she is so eloquent, gentle and generous, but also quite dedicated and devoted to this as more than just a diet, but as a choice, as a lifestyle choice, which has enormous kind of ramifications throughout her life and our life. So welcome to the show, Theresa.
Thank you. You know, we've been wanting to do this podcast for a long time. I think we referred to it maybe in the first episode of Ownstream, possibly in our interview with Pam Popper, because this is such an enormous part of our lives. And Stephen always talks about how he, is there one thing that he's like craving and looking for, and about his calling, really, and his passion, and what is he looking for? And it's always about more freedom in our lives. And mine for a long time has been about thriving in vitality and health and wellness and feeling really good in your body and your space. That's been my quest and search for a number of years. So we're going to talk about that today, about like how I got to that, how I pulled out that interest and transformed my own life with it, and then some of the work that I do with others and how I recommend others begin on this. I'm really excited about this conversation. So let's do it.
Well, let's start from the beginning, because you have a it sort of feels like a very old school upbringing in terms of food, Italian old school. Your dad was a cop here in San Diego. Your grandparents from your mother's side, very traditional Italian family in Massachusetts. So maybe start by talking about your early life, but through the lens of food and maybe some early memories around food. Because every time you guys talk about that, and by the way, we have some amazing Italian dishes that we've transitioned to vegan, which are spectacular, and I love cooking them. And they kind of come from your heart. But maybe talk a little bit about those early years and the food you ate and some early memories about what that was like.
Yeah, I definitely did not grow up in a vegan household.
Vegetarian.
Or close to vegetarian. Yeah, no, meat was a big part of every dinner we had. It was very kind of traditional, on one hand, traditional American, and on the other, very Italian influence. And what I mean by that is every meal had meat at the center, and there were kind of vegetable sides. And, I am put this out there, so grateful to my family for, my mom always had a home cooked meal on the table. She worked so hard in every aspect of my childhood, as did my dad. So, we did eat a lot of food, like not a lot of packaged food. So that was really wonderful, but definitely meat was at the center. My mom jokes about how I never ordered off the children's menu. I'd always when we went out to dinner at a nice restaurant, they'd try to give me the children's menu and I'd order a filet mignon, so I was a big steak eater, ate steak off the bone, like that kind of thing as a child. And my Italian heritage, my grandmother, she's an amazing cook. And my mom and my aunt have taken some of that from her, but big, rich, buttery, meaty sauces, Italian sauces. I used to make ravioli with my grandmother, meat and cheese ravioli, meatballs, sausage. These were big staples in my grandmother's cooking. We spent every summer in Massachusetts where, they were a part of a, Italian immigrant and first and second generation community that was very rich in heritage, so we spent a lot of time eating that kind of food. And then, also alongside that in my childhood, I also remember a lot of I was not pretty overweight. I was somewhat overweight as a maybe 9-10-year-old child before I became a teenager, when I sort of did a lot of restricting and struggled with body image my whole life. So we could talk more about that later. It's a big part of what led me to this vegan diet. But so ate a lot of fast food too. After school, I remember Stephen and I talk about how even though we are we love and crave colorful, vibrant, plant-based food now, still there's this aura of happiness around McDonald's because we both grew up with that. And,
birthday parties at McDonald's.
Yeah, the Happy Meal toys and the burgers. And I haven't had McDonald's in 2 decades. I don't even know how long it's been since I've had McDonald's, at college maybe. But anyway, just that I had a lot of fast food, a lot of ice cream, a lot of just kind of your usual, a lot of your American diet type stuff.
Yeah, when I was coming back from Project Hollywood years ago, we used to eat at McDonald's. We used to eat junk food all the time, which kind of paralleled our lifestyle. But I can remember the last time I ate at McDonald's was probably 10 years ago. And I went out, I was working a day job at the time, and I can't remember what, I guess I'd usually get a sandwich I used to go to Hale and Hearty Soups and get a soup and a sandwich or a salad or whatever. That day I thought, I'm going to go to McDonald's. I haven't been to McDonald's in a while. And I went to McDonald's. I got my standing order, which was 2 cheeseburgers, ketchup only, large fries, and a large Coke or Sprite, whatever. And I thought if I got Sprite, it was a healthier lunch because I wasn't taking in caffeine with Coca-Cola. Anyway, I ate it. And within an hour, I had snapped at 2 coworkers. Oof. And I had no energy. I remember I can, it's like my vision was impaired. My body just sunk down. I can feel my body sinking into the work chair at the office at the time. And I went back the next day and apologized to those people. And they're like, yeah, you seemed a little off. I was a little off. I haven't had McDonald's since then. Although McDonald's are handy places to stop and pee when you're traveling, but that is it, or get a coffee. But anyway, so talking about your early years, so there was it was a very standard American approach to food. Meat was the center of it. Was dairy had any emphasis on dairy? I think there was a lot of emphasis on dairy in my upbringing in the South. We had a lot of gravies and cheeses, and by the time I was 15, there was ranch dressing on virtually everything that came with your food.
We definitely had a lot of butter. I remember buttery mashed potatoes, butter in the Italian sauces, cheese on Italian food. Cutting cheese out to an Italian is almost more sacrilegious than cutting meat out. It's just how do you do Italian food without butter and cheese? I remember getting a lot of reactions like that. So yeah, and a lot of for dessert, a lot of ice cream. But it's interesting. My mom tells me that I rejected cow's milk pretty much from the beginning. Uh-huh. So I never liked milk as a child. I always drank water. My friends would have milk and I would have water. So that's one thing. We'd have to put chocolate in the milk for me to drink it. So anyway.
Well, tell us. So let's kind of carry forward chronologically then. So you had some weight issues, kind of still around the age of 10 or so, and then you kind of move into the teen years, which for most of us are angst-ridden for various reasons. Maybe kind of cover that phase too, because I know there's some interesting things in those years into college. Let's kind of get to when you started to deal with, when you started to look at diet and make some changes. Kind of where were you at that point?
Yeah, so when I came out of my early childhood years into like preteen, that's when I remember being a little bit overweight. Nothing serious, but like I felt really bad. People commented. And so in high school, I restricted a lot. I never had a very, very serious eating disorder, but I did do a lot of like skipping lunch. And certainly food was a pain point in my life. Like my relationship with food became very difficult. And I didn't know a lot as a child about nutrition. I definitely didn't. So what could I do? I could restrict. And I did at the time, actually, I don't even know what it was, but there were early inclinations of interest in vegetarianism. Like I stopped wanting to eat meat for, I think it was only about 6 months in high school. I just stopped eating meat for a while and didn't know how to do that in a healthy way. Just ate mom's fried potatoes instead. It wasn't a healthy thing, but it was interesting. But again, it's so contrary to the lifestyle around me that it didn't last. And when I went to college, so I lost a lot of weight in high school, mostly through I was very active, but also the restriction. And then I got to college and it was just very classic, like all night dining halls. I was also an, insane student, type. And so I would stay up all night eating M&Ms and just crazy stuff, So I definitely gained, I think I gained probably the freshman 20. In that time, it was just a lot of late night pizza, very classic kind of college stuff, fast food, dining hall, overdoing it, big plates, seconds, finding myself free with food in the sense of outside my parents' control in any way that I had control. I used to have thirds when I was eating at home too, but in college I gained a lot of weight, and then I started really exploring diets, and I did a lot of dieting. I did a lot of calorie counting, and then I started working out at the gym. So that became probably, let me think, maybe a decade or so of yo-yo dieting, I'd call it, where I was exploring a really intense fad diet that was unsustainable and trying to work out at the same time, but never really getting results.
Yeah, I think that's and that's kind of where most people get to. If there is a common path here, I think it tends to look like that, which is, okay, I'm gaining a lot of weight. I can see it on my body. And so I need to try a diet or I need to work out more or differently.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where a lot of people end up. They end up in that place of kind of balancing that out for a very long time. Some people throw in the towel. Some people go full hard in, extreme, they become they're working out an hour or so a day just to offset the calorie intake. I don't know how sustainable that is. I think one thing that's nice about the plant-based diet is that in spite of how severe it may seem to you now, I have found it to be very sustainable because it feels good. It feels good virtually all the time. There's no drawback as I can see it. But so that's kind of where people end up, it seems to me in general. But you kept going. So tell us kind of what compelled you to move forward from that. And I think what your next move was becoming a vegetarian. And what was it that said to you, drop meat? Was it maybe the ethics of that? But what was it that that kind of, when you got to that place, you said, this isn't right either. And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, your next move was, okay, I'm going to be a vegetarian. Well, talk to us about that transition.
Yeah. So like I said, I was doing a lot of yo-yo dieting, and that included kind of the all meat, no carb dieting. I would eat steaks every night, that kind of thing. And it never felt good. It doesn't feel good. What a steak really is like a lot of fat. It just, that never felt good. But I went on those diets where I was like, I can eat all the cheese I want. I can eat all the steak I want. And anyway, it didn't feel good. And I don't, to me, I think it was a intuitive thing that was with me my whole life that, like I mentioned in high school, I had a brief interest in vegetarianism. And then when I was traveling in South Africa during law school, at that time, I became interested again in becoming a vegetarian. In law school, I became interested in becoming a vegetarian. I think some of it was intellectual, some of it was in the sense of I could think into eating meat is bad for our environment in so many different ways. It feels like it's not good for my health. That I didn't know a lot of what I know now about how it's not good for my health, but I had a sense of that. But there's also an intuitive spirit, what I now look at, I didn't at the time, as a spiritual reason, which is just that intuitively I felt cleaner, clearer, more aligned with my true self, not eating meat. And so I tried. I tried to become, I became a vegetarian, but I knew nothing about how to eat well. So I called myself like a French fries and bagel vegetarian back then. I remember when I was traveling in South Africa, doing wonderful time of my life, doing like field research in the eastern part of the country, and it was just traveling, and there's many options, I'm sure, but I didn't know where I was, or I was traveling, and a lot of people who travel for work struggle with what they eat, I think, and that was just one example of that. Like I would go just get French fries, like I didn't know what to eat, or couldn't find vegetables. I've had that experience when traveling in the South with Stephen too, or doing road trips, like stopping for fast food. What are you going to eat? And I know there's more and more, thankfully, because I think more and more people are turning to more plant-based diets. Even McDonald's, there's salads or, smoothies. Things are emerging as options. But, for a while then I didn't feel good as a vegetarian either, because I was eating, bagels and French fries. Or for a while I was lacto-ovo vegetarian, and I was eating like egg and cheese sandwiches, like it.
Is the ovo eggs?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that also like just didn't feel good. And so I really struggled, and again, kind of like bounced back and forth. How can I be a vegetarian? And it wouldn't stick because I didn't really feel good doing it. And so for a long time, I knew that I wanted to eat more vegetables, eat like a more actually healthy vegetarian diet, vibrant vegetarian diet, but I didn't really know what to do. And so then I started to learn a few things about, how to make more meals, or, when I was working in New York City at a corporate job, I would, pick up a salad instead of whatever kind of sandwich I was going to get. Or, I started eating oatmeal in the morning. I started to make like just a few tweaks that helped me to be more grounded in real food.
Yeah, and if there's a bottom line to any kind of dietary change, it might come down to that. Eat more actual food. I remember reading The Omnivore's Dilemma 10 or so years ago. Hard to believe it's been that long. And then kind of getting into Michael Pollan a little bit. And I've always appreciated his approach of basically eat plants. Eat real food,
plants, I think
mostly plants, and not a whole lot. Like, don't overeat. The nice thing about plants is that you can eat a lot of plants. Mm-hmm. And we'll get into what that means in a minute. But I also felt like Michael Pollan's work, for me, just didn't go far enough, because it didn't address a lot of the things that are so unsustainable around meat and dairy, and it's kind of broader science, and I think it's largely scientifically proven now, though a lot of people will dispute that, but I'll make that statement, that meat and dairy cause chronic Western disease, period. And so he doesn't really get into that, but so much of what he talks about is helpful, and it really kind of boils down to just eat real food. So the first time I tried to be vegan, if you probably remember this, was like 6 years ago or so, and you were really wanting to move into that diet, and you may have even tried it at that point.
Yep.
But you were a very disciplined vegetarian. I would say at that time.
Yep.
And I said I want to be vegan, and I don't remember what stimulated
Forks
that.
over knives.
Well, no, Forks Over Knives kind of kicked us into what has become a long-term vegan.
Yeah.
But I think at the time it must have been Tynan.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Because Tynan, our
Tynan
third
again.
podcast guest, yeah, he comes up all the time. He's great. Our third podcast guest at the time, I had interviewed him for a dating podcast that I used to do, and he was vegan. And I had read about it, and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. And he was talking about how he felt great and all the broad, sweeping ways that it made sense to him. And so I took that on. But what I didn't do was eat actual real food. I became kind of a processed food vegan. I ate a lot of junk vegan food. I can remember my refrigerator was filled with fake meats. Like my breakfast would be kind of a sugary cereal with no fruit and soy milk, probably flavored vanilla, and this fake sausage. And I think I used to eat a banana. Like that felt like the three things that I used to eat for breakfast, and coffee, and I don't know, I probably drank orange juice too, which is again just a lightning strike of sugar in the morning. Anyway, that was kind of my version of vegan, and it lasted, I think it was August 2011. I tried it for a month. I was like, I can't do this. And so what I learned at the time is unless you're really all in, eating real plants and really embracing the whole diet, then you're not going to feel the benefits from it, which will become the engine that drives this long term. Like, becoming a processed food vegan for me meant I felt just okay, and then eventually a cheeseburger looked really good. Mm-hmm. And so kicking past that into full-fledged vegan, like I'm eating real food. So it's not about vegan, is it? It's really about a whole foods, plant-based diet.
That's right.
Which is what Colin Campbell and Caldwell Esselstyn, Pam Popper, they all kind of call it that. Vegan is short, but vegan can also become a lot of other things, but a whole foods, plant-based diet is what we're talking about as being something sustainable and healthy, and that it will feed itself, essentially. So you became a vegan, and what was it that compelled you kind of past vegetarian into vegan, and maybe some early stories with that for you, which I know are really cool?
Yeah, so after the years of being an unhealthy vegetarian, French fries and bagel vegetarian, what really transformed my relationship with food and the many years of, feeling bad about my body and struggling with different diets was really spiritual work. So about 10 years ago, I had a lot of changes happen in my life, and I started to do some spiritual work and look at, some of my addictive patterns of eating and the way that I was, again, from childhood, as many people, I would say women, but people are obsessed with how they look and how they fit into society. And so I, really had struggled with that, and I think had done a lot of, because I didn't know about food and nutrition, and a lot of try to controlling around my food without actually looking at the, what I was eating and how that affected my body itself, and so got into, cleared out, I guess, a lot of the patterns of unhealthy eating that I had, and started to meditate and do other spiritual practices. And in that process, that intuition that I had, that sense of wanting to get cleaner and more aligned with my food led me, it really was a very, very entwined with my spiritual work, led me very strongly to want to become vegetarian. And then what that meant was vegan, because it was about not harming animals, not harming the planet, being of service to others, which really is part of eating a plant-based diet, is service to others, because if we were to all eat a plant-based diet, there's so many positive effects on our environment and resources that could be shared, because the amount of water we waste, the toxicity released into the environment, the the grain that we use in terms of our factory farming that could go to people who are starving in other parts of the world. So this was very intuitive and aligned with how I wanted to be in the world and how I wanted to feel in my body. I really started to feel like my body was a temple for my spirit. And how would I feel clean? This was at the same time as my yoga practice as well, which, in yoga, there's a principle of non-harming, ahimsa, which is, very overt, related to eating a vegetarian diet. So I got cleaner and cleaner, just wanted to, get cleaner in my diet. And we, as you said, we were in a relationship at that time. Stephen was eating a lot of meat when we were first together. There's lots we could say about that, but but he knew that I had this, that I really was compelled to want to eat cleaner. My diet really supported that, bought me some really key vegan books. And then we both watched Forks Over Knives, which was a major turning point because even though I was having that intuitive sense, and at that time I should say too, I had picked up a few skills about cooking vegetables. I was making stir fries, I was making a lot of salads. There were things that I had started to do, but couldn't really get over the hump with eating a vegan diet and cutting out dairy and eggs. And so we watched Forks Over Knives and it was kind of like, that's it. I also had run into a friend at a wedding and I remember I was eating a piece of cake and I was feeling like, I don't really want this cake. Why am I eating this cake? Not a vegan cake and, just not really good for you. And he looked crystal clear. He kind of had this like light in his eyes and, he said to talk to me about the China study. Ding, 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 ding. He said, if you're weighing becoming vegan, you need to read the China study. And so I can't remember which came first, but Forks Over Knives and the China study are hand in hand. And the China study is talked about at length in Forks Over Knives. And what that movie does is it follows the course of two tremendous inspirational doctors, the course of their study, one from an academic nutritional biochemistry perspective and the other a heart surgeon, following what they learned about how meat and dairy are affecting chronic disease in our society. And the case is so compelling and basically tell us how, the consumption of meat and dairy and the overconsumption of those things is at the heart of heart disease, which seems very obvious to me, but is not to many. Heart disease, diabetes, which is often in our media, certainly linked to sugar, but no, is really linked to meat and dairy, and cancer. And cancer is in my family. My father died of cancer 5 years ago. We had just discovered this right before that. He had a few cancers in his lifetime. I have cancer. Other family members of mine have cancer and have had cancer. And it's, the link that T. Colin Campbell in particular in that movie and in the China study, the links between meat and dairy and cancer are just overwhelming, and the toxic state of the body that they create. And so that movie really was a turning point for us, I think. And since then, I guess that was 6 years ago, maybe, or so.
5 or 6.
Yeah. It was about 6 years ago. Then we just started to become hungry for more information, and we started to watch movies about people had reversed their states of cancer and other diseases with a plant-based diet. And from then on, it was sort of all the pieces were aligned for me that I knew that this clearly was a path for me. And then, started to do more and more and more pursuit of that, avid reading. I took a number of courses. I took I got a certificate in plant-based nutrition from T. Colin Campbell's school at Cornell, did some classes at the Wellness Forum with Pam Popper, took some cooking classes to sharpen my skills and working with vegetables and knife skills, et cetera. And it's been, since then, a real passion point for me, particularly as I've seen other family members suffer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know I don't know exactly how to phrase your calling, but I think it's not important that you find the perfect words for it, but yours is certainly centered around this world of food and healing and vitality and thriving.
Mm-hmm.
Thriving is a great word.
Mm-hmm.
When you think of the whole foods plant-based diet, because when we watch Forks Over Knives, like, I'm naturally skeptical of anything mainstream. And when we saw that movie, it immediately clicked. It was like, this is absolutely dead on right for me. And ultimately, when it comes down to evaluating things for oneself and making decisions, in this day and age of media saturation, you can go online and find an argument for anything, but ultimately it comes down to what resonates.
Yes.
What feels good in my body when I'm thinking about it, looking at it, watching it. This information that's coming at me, does it feel good? Spiritually, I think that is how we move forward.
Yes.
That's how you make decisions in this world, because we have so much information coming at us that it's so easy to get sucked into the way everybody's doing things because it's so confusing, and it's just easier. It's easier to default into that. So it's really about what feels good, what feels right. So when we watched that movie, it felt right. Like, oh my God, this is the truth. I know it. I can feel it. If it's not the truth for everybody, it is the truth for me. And at the same time, I thought, oh my God, how can I give up all of this food, this way of eating that I have become so familiar with? And that's where you were so good. It helped that you were leaps ahead of me in this regard, and that you could take ownership over making some of these transitions for us as a couple at the time. But at that moment for me was two emotions. One of, this is right, this is absolutely true, I'm so excited, I can't even wait. And at the same time, like, holy shit, this is terrifying.
Yeah, and it's interesting that I mentioned that I had an intuitive sense that I wanted to eat more plants, not eat meat, and that just grew and grew and grew as my spiritual practice continued, and as things resonated, like you said, that this is true, this is me, this is, and but so it kind of went away for me. And that's been a different journey for me and Stephen, the desire for meat and cheese. Like, it's gone away. And in the years since, we have not been perfect vegans, and we can talk more about that anytime. But we've, there have been times when we wanted a pizza and ate it. But every time for me, and poor Stephen has dealt with this ad nauseum with me, I'm like, oh, I didn't really want that.
Yeah.
There was a different part of me that wanted that. I'm feeling lazy. I'm feeling exhausted.
Usually it's stress.
We just had a baby. We can't want to cook, or we've just, under-rested, whatever. But there's a different part of me that wants that and sometimes eats it. And then I'm like, immediately like, ugh, the true me did not really want that,
Yeah.
And in the course of, I will say that in the this feels good compartment, if that's, how we pursue, that's one of the ways we pursue our true selves is, the results were electric when we became vegan for both of us, and whole foods, plant-based vegan, not eating all kinds of vegan sausage or vegan cupcakes or whatever. Like, you can't, a friend of mine asked me, how can you be an overweight vegan? You can be an overweight vegan, very easy to do that.
Yeah.
But when we started incorporating more whole foods and plants into our diet and making that the basis of what we were eating, the results were electric. We both just very naturally, and this is why it's not a diet in the way that it's used in society for us. I'm not trying to control what I'm eating. I can eat a variety of abundant foods, basically anything that is plant-based, any vegetable, any fruit, any starch, potatoes, grains, bread. We look for things we eat mostly unprocessed foods, but sometimes we have a piece of bread, sometimes we have pasta. But basically, the results are, the options are unlimited, except that they just need to be plant-based, But it's just the need to try to control, or those things that I obsessed about for so many years just went away entirely. It was intuitive and easy. My options were abundant. I didn't have to control portions because honestly, and a lot of the doctors in the Forks Over Knives and the other movies and books that have been written about this subject talk about is that, if you eat whole fibrous plant foods, you will get full naturally just by eating those foods. You don't have to portion control, So it's really we felt great. We looked great. People asked us, I remember my skin, I thought my skin looked, more radiant and vibrant. And we've had a baby, as you all know. And, the course of that pregnancy was so vibrant for me. Like I will say the first 3 months I ate lots of white foods, breads, pasta. I was not perfectly vegan because I would like dart into a Starbucks and eat a scone to be able to ride the New York City subway. The first 3 months were tough. And then when that went away, once again, I was thriving on like salads and the rest of a plant-based diet for my pregnancy. And then, through the healing period from my pregnancy and the postpartum months, my body healed so easily. And people have said to me, how did you just have a baby? I did not have any experience of extra weight gain or struggling with weight loss after my pregnancy. And I do attribute that to this diet. And, I haven't had an extremely active lifestyle since Sophia was born, except chasing Sophia around. But, it's just my body feels good. And that, as Stephen said, it's like I felt good inside and out and in my, presence in this world through eating this diet.
One thing I should throw in there too is that the percentage of time we've both been vegan, yours is probably like a 99 point something because you are much more dedicated. I would say I'm mid to high 90s. Every once in a while, pizza seems to be the thing which kind of lures me, though. Again, this is not a weekly thing. It's very periodic, and for me, it's usually associated with stress. But I think Colin Campbell in China Study says like 5% is kind of the quote unquote allowable range. Though in my case, I have noticed, and I know this is true for many people, when I can't figure out 5%. 5% turns into 25% in 24 hours. It's just immediate. So I am best when I'm not eating any of that, and that's 99% of the time, and yours is probably 99.5. I mean, it's when we have like a little moment of veering off, it is very rare, and it's usually very brief because our belief in this diet is extremely high. So what I'd like you to talk about is some specifics then and around what is the standard American diet? And then if you were to quantify or qualify the standard vegan diet or plant-based diet, what are those side by side? And let's kind of get into some specifics about what that looks like.
Yeah, the standard American diet, and I know that's different in different parts of America, and we've lived in Brooklyn, in New York City, and now we live in Encinitas in California, two places that are probably not very standard, but in general, what we refer to is a diet that's centered around meat as the center of the plate. It usually takes up about half the plate of a general meal. That could be, a sandwich with a big piece of meat, a steak at dinner, a big piece of chicken, a big piece of pork, breakfast that centers around eggs, bacon. With that, you may have, some grain, maybe. With breakfast, it might be toast, sandwich, like I said. And maybe and often a glass of milk. That seems so foreign to me, actually, but I do know that we've experienced people drinking a glass of milk with their meals. That's not something that's been around me in a while. Or juice, which is just processed. It's just like sugar, basically. If you're drinking straight juice, it's just sugar. And I know that's been marketed as healthy. So a diet centered around meat, often dairy, and then a little, maybe some processed grain, usually, and maybe a little bit of very overcooked vegetables. And a note on the overcooked is that we're also exploring and more just incorporating raw elements into our diet just to have the vegetables in their, most alive, pure form to get to maximize the nutrients. We definitely don't eat all raw. We're not close to it, but we're incorporating more and more because when you overcook, an image that comes to my mind is some, green beans we've eaten in the South, which like when I'm looking for veggies in the South, when we visit Stephen's family, it's hard, to find veggies that aren't cooked in pork fat, but very overcooked green beans. That's what appears to me. A vegan plant-based diet, it was one that's based on whole plant foods, that could be for breakfast, something like oatmeal, and oatmeal with a lot of fruit, or just like some people eat just a lot of fruit for breakfast. There's some really good cultured coconut yogurts that I found at the farmer's market that aren't full of sugar, which many at the supermarket are. But really like fruits and vegetables and grains. We eat, a lot of brown rice, but there's so many different types of grains you can explore. Millet, wheat berries, amaranth, farro. There's so many. But our plate looks like, half of it is filled with green veggies. For example, we eat a big salad with a lot of our meals. Fruits, veggies, grains, beans are a big part of this. And then a little bit of possibly tofu, tempeh. Again, we tried, those are not that processed in terms of plant proteins that are more typical, kind of what you call plant proteins, but there is protein, it's worth saying. There is protein in green vegetables and beans and rice and, other things other than tempeh and tofu. Those are more substitute for a meat type of thinking of protein, but protein is throughout. The type and level of protein we really need is found in a well-balanced plant-based diet.
Yeah, and in fact, in Forks Over Knives, if you're a Netflix subscriber, you can go watch that as soon as you finish listening to this podcast. And if you haven't watched Forks Over Knives, it's the perfect kind of mass media feeling film to walk into that conversation through. It is thorough, it's inspiring, it's well done, it's pro. A lot of kind of niche documentaries are like, oh man, this is a little too homegrown for me. But that film feels like you're sitting in a movie theater and you're in the hands of people who know what they're doing. That's the key. And Colin Campbell and Caldwell Esselstyn are like, they feel like my grandfather. Who didn't have
a vibrant, healthy version.
Well, who didn't have grape nuts and milk for breakfast. God, I love my grandfather. I don't mean to kind of compare him to those, but they have that warmth and that generosity to them. But on Netflix, there's a companion film. I think it's called Further Conversations with the doctors that they profile, the scientists that they profile in that film. Most notably, T. Colin Campbell. And he talks about protein. He makes the very clear point that there is enough protein. So I think the recommended daily allowances for protein is a certain number. I don't know what it is, and I'm certainly not going to guess because I don't want to make that kind of statement.
Less than 10%.
But it's not a huge amount. And virtually every vegetable contains that amount of protein in it. Like broccoli, I think, has a decent amount of protein in it. You don't actually need a lot of protein. This is a myth, a marketing myth, which are prevalent. You don't need a lot of protein, and that protein source does not have to be meat or dairy. It can come from anywhere and is bountifully found in most plants that you may be surprised about. Anyway, he talks about that at length in those in Forks Over Knives. That's covered as well, more detail in those conversations. So the protein thing is like, it's out there, it's exploited by people who want to sell you things that are very high in protein. We don't need that much protein. I think I can see Dr. Campbell or Caldwell Esselstyn saying like most of that stuff is just peed out. We just pee it out because we're eating so much protein we think we need it, and most of it just ends up in our urine. Anyway.
and in Forks Over Knives and other documentaries, there are, really strong athletes talking about this. Rich Roll is one of our favorites. There are major athletes talking about how they've thrived on a plant-based diet.
Major
so
football players,
all those years all those years that I was working out and eating steak, what I got was fat, not protein. Because we don't need it. We just don't need it, and it absolutely, we absolutely the meat and dairy obsession of this society, commonality, the habit is a programmed one from media. The meat and dairy industries are very powerful. They're very powerful in their messaging in the media. They have a lot of money, and they use it to put ads on TV and to influence people in government. And that's just that. It's very clear. Even studies are, Colin Campbell talks a lot about this in his second book, Whole, which is in others too, that the influence of industry in our dietary guidelines, in laws, incentives to farmers it's throughout. And so it's just worth questioning, right? It's just worth questioning. And again, it's all about trying something to see how you feel. Do you feel good or not?
Yeah.
And if you feel good, that's really the most important thing, I think. But yeah, the messages about protein, it's a total myth propagated by industry and media, really, because we don't need massive grams of protein. And I went through all those years of steaks, eating a lot of Greek yogurt because of the huge protein count. I mean, we don't need it. And calcium is the same. I'll just say that for now too. All the milk does a body good. And that is just, again, it's just media. And I remember those images from my childhood, all the milk does a body good ads. Really, what milk is we are the only species that drinks another animal's milk created for its own children, so it's baby calf. I can't remember what Dr. Clavis.
Cow estrogen.
It's cow estrogen. It's baby calf juice. What it is it's a mother's milk for a baby calf. And what it's supposed to do is grow that baby calf very fast into a big cow. And so it has a similar effect, so it's on us. And it also is that estrogens in dairy, and as well as the protein in dairy, have been linked through many studies to cancers and women's cancers caused by the hormones in dairy. So, calcium actually, what happens when you drink dairy is that it creates a state in the body where calcium becomes leached from the bones to neutralize the acidic state in the body, and therefore you lose calcium. There's studies linking osteoporosis to the consumption of dairy. So, again, where do you get it? Green leafy vegetables. Really good source of calcium.
Yeah, calcium. That whole milk thing. It creates the problem that we're told it is solving. Osteoporosis, calcium deficiency. We need more calcium. We need more calcium. That one's pretty bad. I want to just personally talk about it, and then I'd like to hear what you would say to this, and then let's kind of go through your process, because it's very clear and I think very manageable. It's not something that's overwhelming or daunting, but when we transitioned, the effects of that diet on my body and on my well-being and on my feelings were surprisingly big, in that I found myself immediately sleeping better. I slept better right off the bat. I was kind of amazed at that. I lost weight. I just suddenly this, and I've never had a problem with my weight until about maybe 5 to 10 years ago did I even begin to notice that I could put on weight. I've always just never had that as a challenge. But I noticed that I had become accustomed to seeing myself in this kind of 38-year-old body, which was, it was a little swollen here or there. There was a little belly there. There was just a little bit of weight added, though it wasn't anything you would notice from the outside specifically. And it certainly wasn't anything out of keeping with people in my age range. I think there is this general accepted notion that as you age, you're just going to put on some weight. You just add weight, which is the result of the diet, not the body, not the natural course of the body, which, as I've come to learn, is the case. So when I went vegan, bang, all that extra weight was gone. And now that we've introduced more raw foods, I'm as lean as I've ever been in as far back as I could remember. I mean, my body looks like my high school body. You know what I mean? It's unbelievable. But sleeping has been better. One thing I struggle with is caffeine. I'll have a little too much caffeine in the morning, but that never impacts my sleep because I haven't had any after 10 a.m., 9 a.m. Bathroom episodes were just quick and easy, felt great, and you're out of there, as it should. Mentally much clearer. And I think one of the coolest things is feeling connected to the food. We used to be members of the Park Slope Food Co-op in Brooklyn, and so we had a richer relationship with the source of the food. When you eat real food, you look at a blueberry, it looks like something you know. Whereas if you look at packaged Sara Lee blueberry cobbler, like, I don't know, I don't actually know what any of that is. And don't tell me you're going to look at the ingredients, because nobody looks at the ingredients. Nobody does that. So you know what this is. You know where it comes from, or at least you know it comes from a thing growing out of the ground. But there's this greater, wholer relationship to the food, which connects me to the planet. It connects me to nature. Like, there's such the impact of this diet. And I say this as somebody who kind of stumbled into this, is so far greater than what I knew. Like, I expected, I'll probably feel a little better, and maybe any kind of random guilt I may have picked up along the way about eating animals might fall off. But so much else has happened as a result of that. You mentioned skin, like we look healthy. We look healthy. Like, we feel healthy. Like, we sleep well. Like, this is how you're supposed to live. It's not supposed to be some kind of process of decline and weight gain, and, you're kind of gasping at the end. Like, that's actually not what the human body is designed for. If you eat this diet, you can experience that now, like soon. Like, the body heals itself so quickly. Like, I had eaten a certain way for almost 40 years. Almost 40 years. I'm 45, and I've probably been eating like this 5-6 years. So almost 40 years I ate a standard American diet. Didn't have any huge issues with weight. But even I, like, within 30 days felt markedly better. Like, wow, this is incredible. I feel great. I have consistent energy throughout the day. And as an entrepreneur, like, that is really helpful. So those are my experiences of that, which surprised me as to their how big they were, how far they reached into my life. I'd like to hear you talk about that too.
Yeah, as I said, I struggled with weight my whole life, and that was so amazing. All the time I spent thinking about it or feeling bad, that just went away. My body felt great. I, have done some running in my life. I've done a lot of yoga, and I just felt thriving in those practices at the time. I love that you brought up the feeling connected to the food, because Stephen kind of jokes, I am like a big plant geek, but like I love plant foods. I think they're vibrant and colorful and beautiful. I love greens. I love walking through a farm with greens. My best friends took me for our wedding on my bridal shower to like a farm where we picked food and cooked it. Like, and I was thinking as you were sharing that those early experiences that I loved with my grandmother, it was really about that creating together. It wasn't about the meat. It was this, like, what's happened for me is this love of creating food and the connection to the earth I feel, which just, again, resonates with the truth of my life, who I am, alignment, where I come from, how we're all connected. There's like a real deep sense of connection and truth through the way that I eat. And I just want more of it. We were talking a little bit before this podcast about, this just continues to grow for us, So not only do we want our diet to get even more whole, so any kind of processed elements, we've had even like our sprouted Ezekiel wheat muffins are in the fridge, in the wheat, English muffins in the fridge. Like, we've had them in the freezer for a while. We barely even eat bread anymore. We just want to get to like the more whole foods, the better. And now, again, incorporating raw elements. And now we really want to learn how to grow our own food, So part of our quest this summer in getting into nature and repatterning and making a decision about what we do next, a big part of that, which we've talked about on other podcasts, is finding some land so we can grow our own food. And I had also like a love affair with urban farms in New York, and took an urban farming class in Brooklyn, and really, really want to do more of that. And so we want our food to come from, we want to have that connection of actually working with the earth. And right now, the closest we get is we have a farm box delivered every week from local farms. It's put together, it's beautiful, and go to farmers markets. But we want to deepen that even further.
Yeah, I mean, back in Brooklyn, you've got the Park Slope Food Co-op, which we were members of for a long time, which was really great. Out here, the version of that is this Farm Fresh to You CSA that we are part of, which is terrific. And they have some good local farmers markets here. But yes, seeing plants come out of the ground, knowing that process. Like we had a rooftop garden in Brooklyn for a long time, which was fun. That was great. And it just kind of whetted our appetite for what we want to do next in terms of growing our own food on a real little farm, family farm. So let's get into this this program, if you will, for transitioning, because people, if they're listening to this and they're interested in considering this, they might be wondering, how do I do that? You know, you guys watch Forks Over Knives. Theresa had a lot of kind of prior knowledge about what to do here. I was lucky in that I was with you and you could lead the way. But I know there are some quantifiable moments of do this, then do this, then do this. Lead us through that process so that people can understand more about what it looks like to go from where they're at to what we're talking about, which is feeling amazing and thriving in our health and our diets and consequently into our lives.
Yeah, great. So there's really about sort of a 4-step process when I look back at my experience and the education I've had on this subject. I think of it as 4 things to do as a process. And the first is, and what I do with people is, the first is inventorying your current state of eating. And I've done this with people, you know, when I worked with Pam Popper, and I've done other explorations of my own diet, and it's important to continue doing. But the first is inventorying your current eating. And that includes both like a log of what you eat, when you eat it, loosely about how much, but what exactly you're eating, as well as the patterns surrounding your eating. And what I mean about that is, eating your lunch and eating your food in front of the TV. How many people do that at night? I grew up doing it with my parents. Eating your lunch at your desk at work. Oh, that's a pain point for me, and something I have done and still sometimes do for years. It's definitely a pattern in New York. Are you present with what you're eating? Do you even know what you're eating or how much? So looking at kind of the patterns around food as well as some motivations around food. Are you eating addictively? And what I mean by that is, are you substituting food for a spiritual search, for pain in your life? Are you eating over pain? Are there ways that you're eating that might be causing you to not have a real connection with how your food is impacting your body and your well-being? So that's the first thing that I do. Also around beliefs. What beliefs do you have around food? Do you think you need a lot of protein? Do you think meat equates with protein? Is that something that, is a belief that actually we can deconstruct looking at the science? So taking a look at all of that, what's informing it? How does it look today? Then taking that, and the next few steps are really about putting into action a plan for changing that in the way that you seek. So
let me just throw in there, by the way, the act of writing down what you actually eat every day for, a week or two? Mm-hmm. It blew my mind. Like, I can so easily forget what I've eaten. I can so easily forget that I've indulged already today, is what it sounds like for me. When I did this process, like, oh my God, I eat the same stuff. It's not very healthy. And I will give myself little treats throughout the day. And writing that down was literally, it blew my mind. Like, I expected it to be a kind of humdrum experience. Like, okay, all right, I'll do that. I'll indulge this process. But actually doing it was extremely revealing to see my habits and how I can fool myself and trick myself into eating in ways that aren't serving me. It's really, really amazing.
Yeah, our own appraisal of ourselves is not always accurate in our minds, and I've had that experience too. Like, I remember when I did an inventory with Pam Popper, and I thought, I was like, oh, I eat a cookie every once in a while. Pam talks about treats. Okay, we can have treats, but treats like, okay, I'll have a piece of cake on my birthday, not I'll have a piece of cake every night, and I really like chocolate chip cookies, and I thought, and you can have vegan chocolate chip cookies, and
they're good ones.
They're really good, but every once in a while I did an inventory. I was like, oh my God, like, I want it every night, and actually doing the inventory itself was enough to help me kind of make a change. But so inventory is number one. Then putting into action some changes around your patterns. So the first of those is shopping. Do you know how to shop in a healthy way at a grocery store starting point. Where do you shop? So looking at where you shop, do you shop mostly in the middle aisles, which are kind of processed foods, or do you shop on the outside, which is where you can find all the beautiful produce? Do you know how to pick out produce? Do you know what to even buy for meals? Do you know what other kind of options, what other things exist? What type of bread is the healthiest? What, probiotic foods. We've incorporated a lot of fermented foods into our diet, which help with digestion, things like slaws and kimchi. So really how to navigate a grocery store. And even further than that, where can you find the best produce in your area? Is there a CSA? Is there a farmer's market? Thinking about changing some of your shopping, really accessing the best whole food possible. The third is to develop a new meal plan. You need a plan of action for how to eat in a different way. It can't just, it's hard to just come about on its own, right? So what I recommend to people is taking, like Stephen said, we kind of, a lot of us, and there are studies on this, like we basically eat the same things all the time. It's funny in a world of infinite types of things that you can eat. Usually we have some patterns, and often they say that like, how to cook 5 things. People know how to cook, or regularly cook, I should say, 5 things. So how I started to do this was I just tweaked the 5 things I knew how to cook and made them vegan. So when I was making stir fry with chicken, I would take the chicken out, put tofu in, I would replace white rice with brown rice. Really easy if you know how to make a stir fry to do that. Or tacos, same thing. If you make tacos with any kind of meat, you can easily make tacos with tofu or not even with tofu, with beans, guacamole, a few fresh vegetables like cut tomatoes and purple cabbage and green onions, get some rice, some black beans, put some spices in that. That makes a really beautiful meal that we thrive eating, If for breakfast, take a look at, what you're eating. A really easy substitute for breakfast is oatmeal. It's nice in cooler parts of the year and warmer parts of the year. You might, we've recently transitioned to eating a more seed-based breakfast with chia seeds and all that. That might be a little too exotic to start with, but I ate oatmeal and just oatmeal for a while with apples in it, with in certain parts of the year, with berries in it, other parts of the year, with almond milk. Put some kind of nice to get some texture in that. Put some walnuts in it. It's really warm and wholesome and felt great in my body. And then, for lunch, it's really easy to, get a salad or, it's really easy to swap out some of your common things you're used to eating with vegan versions of that, And I should say, if you want to, pare down the amount of meat, again, we've had trouble eating and I haven't desired to, and Steven's had trouble eating like a 5% meat diet, But if, as a step, adding more and more vegetables to meals that you have, or making meat more of a condiment, or only including it every once in a while, that's a huge step in the right direction of feeling better and feeling better in your body. And being more healthy. So that's, again, the second step is coming up with a meal plan. So replacing those meals and coming up with a meal plan for about a week, I do with clients to get started. Again, because we often eat the same things. And having a week's plan is really enough to have some ideas. I also come up with snacks that fill in, just really easy vegan snacks, hummus and carrots, a handful of almonds and an apple. It's very easy to get some satisfying vegan snacks in there. The fourth step is ongoing development, I would say. I've said maintenance before, but really this is about thriving, right? So how do you make this a vibrant diet for you? So once you've got the basics down in terms of shopping and a meal plan, how do you keep making this exciting? We kind of have, one of our stumbling blocks over time has been kind of boredom with the foods we're eating. So the ways that I've done that and do that with clients is developing additional skills, so trying a new recipe a week, or if that's too much, trying a new recipe a month, like making it a big Sunday dinner where you invite some friends over and you try a new recipe, or taking classes. As I mentioned earlier, I took some classes where I learned how to cook new vegetables, or one class you can learn how to cook an entirely new meal that has an appetizer, entree, dessert, and then you can, work that into your repertoire. There's some really great resources out there online. Vegan recipes online. Oshi Glows is one of my favorite websites, where you can just pick up new recipes, and some have, very easy, some are more elaborate than others. And we've tried the full range, but you can pick up things online. And also something that's been important to us as part of this ongoing work is building community, so finding others in your area that are doing this, becoming part of online communities. There's so many of, people who are thriving in this way that you can join, so that there is that, the mainstream path, as we talk about in Ownstream a lot, is like really well worn. And you're going to be bombarded if you watch any TV or see any movies or participate in mainstream culture. You will be bombarded with the idea that meat equals protein and you must have it. And you're doing something wrong if you don't, So like really you got to feed, so to speak, the truth. You have to feed the truth. And by doing that, you need to keep consuming, documentaries, web content, community, create a community for yourself, join online communities where people are doing this and feeling great. I also offer to people I work with ongoing coaching and support as you hit those bumps in the road, new ideas, fresh ideas, help to keep making it a thriving life.
Yeah, that's good. I wanted to add a few things, although there so many came to mind, but like the community part is really key, just because I think making change in a vacuum is difficult. It's not impossible, but it is difficult. And the beauty of now is that most of us have internet access. Certainly anybody in the United States listening to this has internet access, I would venture to guess. So there is a way to at least create online community. There's all kinds of cool Facebook groups around this. There are seemingly every month new powerful pieces of media coming out. Recently we had What the Health, which was by the guys who did Cowspiracy, which come at this diet from very different angles, but they end up in the same place, like eat plants, you'll be fine, basically. But the other thing is like the shopping part is way more layered than I expected. And the challenge in when you start to really peel back the layers of what the industrialization around food and how even buying plants, that's like a gigantic step for a lot of people. But once you realize that like a lot of this stuff is farmed in these gigantic industrial farms and they're actually not that healthy, covered in pesticides or what have you, or they've burned up so many fossil fuels getting to where you are, you eventually want to, at least I did, I wanted to tap into the source where this food comes from. And so farmers markets are great. Part of what you do is help people find a CSA or identify farmers markets within driving distance. So you can have that more holistic relationship to food and nature, which it's such a value add. It's such a benefit to this diet, is knowing that. Like just having that relationship, having that information flowing through you as you're eating the food is enormously enriching. I don't think life is about necessarily getting, finishing the race faster than somebody else. We can get caught up in that. I certainly do. But really, like those moments of like, I picked this apple. And we grated it and we put it into the oatmeal and now we're eating it. And there's just something to that. There's something enormously nourishing about that in so many ways. It reaches far beyond nutrition and diet. So your coaching is very layered and nuanced and textured and is obviously, it kind of follows this format, but it is obviously adapted to each person that comes your way. I don't know if you want to add to that, but having seen you do this, everybody's different in where they're at with their diet and what they like, what they don't like. So there is a kind of customization, if you will, that happens.
Yeah, it is very individualized. Just even walking through that process I just talked about. I mean, as you said, everybody's going to be different. Everybody's got different eating patterns, different challenges that they have around food, different goals. We talk about goals at the beginning. Different, preferences, ways that you eat now, places you shop, level of knowledge about food. So, what I offer is meeting you where you're at, which is both to meet your goals, to meet the information that you do or don't have, to help with that, to help find resources in your particular area. But this process can really work for everyone, meeting them where they're at.
So if you go to our website, so Theresa's program is called Plant-Based Living, and it's basically about the process we just outlined. It's taking you from wherever you are and to a place where your diet is optimized, your relationship to food is optimized. This world of health and eating and diet is covered fully. And so ownstream.co/coaching, you'll find, if you scroll down there, you'll see a beautiful picture of Theresa on our honeymoon in front of they look like eggs as I looked at them later on, but they're actually banana pancakes and fresh fruit and coffee at a beautiful B&B up in Ubud, Bali, where there's phenomenal food. And those pancakes were vegan, by the way, so in case you're wondering. So if you go to that part of the website, you can click on a link and you can schedule a free 30-minute consultation with Theresa. And the aim of that call is to just give you value, to help you kind of march forward from wherever you are to a next step or two along your path or journey with food, diet, and transitioning and contemplating health and what you're putting into your bodies. So that's a 30-minute call. And then from there, a longer-term relationship can evolve. Usually by the end of that 30 minutes, Theresa knows if you're right for what she offers, and you will most certainly know what's right if she's right for you. This we've found, I think you'll agree, is a really easy, graceful way to just, without a lot of pressure or salesmanship, kind of acquaint a person with you, what it's like to work with you in this process. So do you want to add anything to that? Or, I mean,
I think that the 30-minute, it's a great way to just kind of get to know each other. Again, more about what's going on with you and what I offer and if they're a match. And also, usually I'm able to offer some really helpful tips as a starting point in that conversation. So that's also great.
So you'll walk away from that 30 minutes with a lot of value added to you, whether or not you work with Theresa after that. It's really more about just kind of facilitating your path. So ownstream.co/coaching. Check it out. I'm not, quote unquote, a client, if you will, but I can attest that working with Theresa, just having seen her work with others, is you get so much more than what you even think you're going to get. She over-delivers. Easy for me to say, I know, but she's a very generous, loving, caring person, and this is her sweet spot. If this is an interest of yours, I can virtually guarantee your life will be dramatically transformed for the better through working with her and availing yourself of her immense knowledge, as has mine. On a daily basis, I'm the lucky one who gets to live with you and benefit not only from all that comes with that, but certainly your focus on this area has been tremendously beneficial to me. We will, in the show notes for this episode, list a whole bevy of resources, documentaries, books, other resources. Pam Popper's podcast with us, I think it was episode 6 or 5, back a few months ago. She really gets into the science of this. She's an MD, or is she? She's a
naturopathic.
She's a naturopathic doctor. She has the science at her fingertips.
She's read every piece of science on nutrition.
She's a powerhouse. She's a real powerhouse. I think that episode has been shared on social media a few hundred times, maybe even up to 1,000 now. It's been rapidly digested, to use a bad food and diet metaphor. So before we go, we will have all of those resources listed at ownstream.co/Theresa Sgobba, TheresaSgobba. But before we go, let's get into our 3 questions. Question number 1, what book or books up to 3 would you recommend that every human being should read?
Yeah, I was thinking about whether they should all be food books or books that have been important to me, but I think I'll go with the latter because, like I said, my own spiritual life and changes were a huge part of what fed my knowledge that this was the true me, the path for me and the resonance. So the first one, which I think I talked about on our first podcast, was A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Really accessible, very clear message that just completely shifted my perspective on my place in the world, helped me to see that I wasn't controlled by my past experiences or my mind, and that there was a whole vast, abundant depth of me that existed beyond the person I had, grown up to be as Theresa. So that I think first, that book just opened up a whole new vast potential for me. And again, it's such a good start for anyone who's curious about a spiritual path, or even just needing a brush up on some of the basics of a message. Really profound book for me. The second is one that we're reading now, which is now I'm gonna mess up the title. The direct means to eternal direct.
The direct means to eternal bliss.
The direct
Michael
means
Langford.
Yes, the direct means to eternal bliss. He uses the phrase in the book, this is the most direct means to eternal bliss, but the book is actually called The Direct Means to Eternal Bliss. And it's, I've read a lot of spiritual books over the years that I've been on this quest, and this is the most clear and concise rendering of a path to connection with awareness and source and truth that I've ever experienced. Corey Katuna mentioned it in her podcast, that Bentinho Massaro had recommended it to his students, and truly it is. It really offers no excuse. It has left me with no excuse not to meditate, which in the course of a number of other spiritual paths, I've found excuses not to meditate for many years, and really like the periods of meditation have just opened up a vast new connection for me in the week since beginning reading that. So that it's also a very short book, but really one that's really requires some slow reading because it's the depth is profound. And then the third will be the most important book for me in this learning about food and health, which is The China Study by T. Colin Campbell, which gets into a vast study. T. Colin Campbell has done a number of work in his career around the link between diet and cancer, specifically meat and dairy and cancer. And that book, again, is sort of the foundation of my work in this area, my interest leading me down the path. And it's just, for me, the evidence is undeniable, the connection between the way that we as a society generally eat in the Western world and cancer, which is, as I said, very important in my family. There's a number of other amazing books about food and diet by my just inspirations, Caldwell Esselstyn, Neil Barnard, Pam Popper, that we'll list in the show notes, but that's the one I would mention here.
Perfect question number 2 is, what's the best meal you've ever had?
This is, I can't believe we ask our guests this question because it's so difficult. But the one that came to mind was a meal that we had in Goa, India, which was, we had a lot of really heavy food in India. We could have another whole podcast on trying to eat vegan while you're traveling. And we've had some successes and more challenges with that. But while we were in India, there's a lot of vegetarian food, but a lot that includes dairy. And sometimes our communication was not excellent to try to not have dairy. And so, we were in Goa. We were staying in a beach resort, but we saw that there was this vegan cafe, hidden. We didn't know how hidden it was until we walked miles to get to it, where they had a garden and were growing probably it just was the freshest food I'd ever tasted. And I don't know if it was because we had not been eating fresh food and it was just such an oasis, or it was the meal itself, but we had, there just a variety of plant-based foods. We had a beautiful salad that I remember had, this is my thing, is like all kinds of fresh greens in it. There was basil in it. Every bite you took, you could taste kind of a different flavor of green that I thought was just tremendous. And then we had a plate that was full of vibrant roasted vegetables and some kind of like seasoned tempeh that was just fantastic. A potato, a sweet potato mash. It was my favorite thing with food is fresh, crisp vegetables, vibrant color. When I'm creating new meals, I often just want every color of the rainbow on the plate. And those are the meals that usually get me.
I can remember that meal, but I remember more the getting to there and almost getting lost getting back. That meal was incredible, but and I think that was towards the end of our stay, and it was near Arganda Beach. I'll try to find the name of it and put it.
Maybe Blue Planet Cafe,
Blue
something
Planet
to that
Cafe
effect.
sounds about right. Yeah, it was phenomenal and totally surprising that it was that great. Last but not least, what have you learned in the last 30 days that you think every person should know?
So what comes to mind here is related to the Michael Langford direct means to eternal bliss. But we've talked about this on a recent podcast. But it has to be about the work that we've been doing around meditation and Bentinho Massaro's teachings. And I guess what I've learned, something important that I've learned, is that you don't necessarily have to work for 20 years to become enlightened. Like I said about meditation before, I've made a lot of excuses. I've prioritized a lot of things in my life: work, overworking, various activities. Michael Langford calls them unnecessary activities in your life.
Period.
What can you pare out? And Bentinho says that, and this book talks about, that you can find enlightenment if you really dedicate it to yourself in a much shorter period of time. That it's accessible right here and now. That all you have to do is stop and be with it, and really spend some time focusing on the truth of who you are. And that in what the teachings that we're following right now is sitting and watching your own awareness of the world. Who am I beyond this person I've understood myself to be? And that's right here and now. I can do it at any moment. And the more I do it, the clearer I'm going to become aligned with that, and the less identified I'll become with my smaller identity. So that's here right now that we can access. That's what I've learned.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, those are three really great things. We will list links to much of what you just mentioned, particularly those books, in the show notes for this episode. There's also a recent video out, that interview with Bentinho. We'll throw that in there too if you're interested in that. A new, really beautiful video interview with him, which to me is a signature kind of interview of who is this guy anyway, if that's your question. If not, then there's plenty of other people to explore. But the show notes for this episode will be at ownstream.co/Theresa Sgobba, Theresa Sgobba. And to learn more about Theresa's coaching and to put yourself on her calendar for that free 30-minute consultation, go to ownstream.co/coaching. And I should just throw in here, too, if you're interested in working with both of us on this kind of lifestyle redesign, which really probes, at least initially, the question of what is my calling, and then kind of taking that into whatever area of your life that seems to want or need that. And very often it's work and career, but typically that also influences other things too. Then that can also be located there, and you can talk to both of us. So the way our coaching works, if you want to talk to Theresa about this this plant-based living, or both of us about lifestyle redesign, free 30-minute consultation. We love talking to people anyway. And in this 30 minutes, we'll all know if this relationship should move forward or not. And you will leave that call with tremendous value. And I can imagine with talking to Theresa, there will be very clear action steps to take as a result of that 30-minute call. So you'll walk away with like stuff to do, like changes to implement, like things to try right away. And that's always very exciting, is to kind of get into action movement with this stuff. So social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Ownstream, and on Instagram at own_stream. And we post a lot on Instagram. Right now, we're posting a lot of travel pictures because we're about to to do a big trip and a lot of content related to our van conversion. So if that's interesting to you, be sure to follow us on Instagram at own_stream. Otherwise, the website's ownstream.co. Check us out. We thank you for your time. Have I left anything out?
No, that's great.
All
This has
right.
been so fun.
Yeah, this has been amazing. Thank you, Theresa, for your generosity and warmth. And to me, when I hear you talking about this, I hear you kind of just loving, like it's just comes from such a pure, loving, conscious place. And what a great thing that is. What a great gift to give to me and to others. And I know it's very, very rewarding for you to be involved in this. So thank you. And thank you for tuning in. And we will be back next week with more. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to the Ownstream podcast. To learn more and connect with us, please visit ownstream.co or follow us on Twitter at Ownstream and Instagram at own_stream.